Good day, ladies and gentlemen of the press. It is our pleasure at the African Action Congress to welcome you to this auspicious press conference that has been organized to espouse some of the issues bedeviling our country, Nigeria, to assess the state of the country, the socio-political conditions of the mass of our people, to criticize as necessary, and to proffer solutions as a foresighted political party armed with revolutionary ideas. We are gathered here today, not as accidents of history, but as conscious elements positioned by past and current realities that are due to the ubiquitous failure of government, which has led the Nigerian state to a total collapse. But as nature abhors vacuum, the burden to right the wrongs in our socio-political and economic spheres have rested on us. This burden we have carried with pride for the last 3 years as a political party. There are no milder words to put the state of the nation other than disarray, confusion, cannibalistic, reeking incompetence of the highest order and backwardness. Since flag independence in 1960, the everyday Nigerian whose interests we protect and aspirations we push at the African Action Congress have been shut out of governance. Despite the 22 years of uninterrupted civil rule, the average Nigerian cannot boast of any dividends of the much-touted democracy. He has been left to cater for himself in all forms of human survival. Recent of all the darts thrown at him is the sermon that he should find a way to defend himself against violent attacks by different types of terrorists the government have found comfortable names for. You have different names these days. You have bandits, you have killer headsmen. Funny of all is the UGM, the unknown gunmen. The day I saw that acronym, I was so shocked that we've gotten to this stage in the country where terrorists are now given comfortable names, and in fact, they are being codenamed. To score the Buhari regime on its failure to fulfill on its promises, the major promises, the three promises, to the mass of our people will be a waste of productive time. We shall require another measurement scale for it. In 2015 and again in 2019, the APC campaigned on three pillars, that is security, anti-corruption, and economy. The Buhari regime has failed woefully on these three. On security has been democratized and has become so pervasive that there is no greater testimony to the large scale of insecurity in the land than the robbery of the chief of staff to the president within Aso Villa presidential precincts, and the recent evasion, killing of 2 officers, and abduction of another officer inside the nation's premier military academy, the training institution where people are trained to defend others, the defenseless. I'm talking about the Nigerian Defense Academy, NDA. The Buhari regime is a god with clay feet, which is incapable of protecting itself and its officials from the insecurity it has wrought on the nation. If it is so incompetent in protecting its high-ranking officials, how can it protect the ordinary citizens? Can one give what it doesn't have? It is so unfortunate that there has not been any progressive realization of the safe and conducive space for all. Rather, Nigeria has retrogressed under the Buhari regime, and it is now the 3rd most terrorized country in the world. Placing the Nigerian space on a map today, the Buhari regime cannot boast of 10% where it has total control of and can assert sovereignty. We now have a horrible situation where terrorists now do humanitarian works like international NGOs. They impose taxes on citizens. And even in Borno State, recently we also saw in the news where a sect of the Boko Haram declared a governor for a particular region in Borno State in this same state. That's to tell us that if you place the Nigerian map today on this table, this Buhari regime cannot boast of 10% where it has sovereignty. Look at what's happening in the northeast. Bandits have taken over. What's happening in the northwest, it's the same thing. If you leave the whole north, move down to southeast, that place is even a mess right now when it comes to anarchy. Come to the southwest, kidnappings, harassings, different violent crimes are just, the order of the day. So the government, when it goes about to tout sovereignty and all of that, cannot beat its hands on the chest to say it has sovereignty. And what is sovereignty when people are not secured? What is sovereignty when you cannot boast of even the monopoly of violence? And that is what we are discussing here today. On anti-corruption, the Buhari regime came in 2015 huffing and puffing about fighting corruption and mouthing slogans such as, if we do not kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. Rather than kill corruption, it has pampered the corrupt. The regime continues to deodorize its officials engaged in corruption and abuse of office. The APC membership card is now effectively a get-out-of-jail card for corrupt officials. People standing trial for corruption simply move into the party and their sins are forgiven, as stated by its former chairman, Adams Oshomole. There is no better example of this than the current Minister of State for Petroleum, Timi Presivia, who had all his property earlier seized via court order, some of which he deposed to in an affidavit were not his, returned to him by the EFCC when he became the arrowhead of the party's rigging machine in Bayelsa State. The regime has bungled almost all corruption cases instituted and has failed to achieve a conviction in the rash of corruption trials it instituted on coming to power in 2015. On the economy, there is no sector where the regime's abysmal failure and incompetence is most glaring than the economy. To pose the question which the current Minister of Works posed to other peers of the two left legs we call major political parties in Nigeria, the PDP, during 2015 elections. And what's that question? He said, are your lives better today than they were 5 years ago? I think the resounding answer today is no. Unlike Midas, everything Buhari and his regime touches simply turns to dust. The first economic recession Nigeria witnessed was in 1984, during his short-lived, brutal regime. In a second coming to power, Nigeria has suffered two other economic recessions, one in 2016 and another in 2020. He has the uncanny ability to turn success to failure and prosperity to poverty. The economy under Buhari has been characterized by widespread poverty, galloping inflation, and unsustainable debt overhang. And the most potent of all the economic woes that you don't need any professor in economics to tell anybody is the devaluation of the naira. It is the position of the African Action Congress that the democratic space in the last 22 years, and most especially under the Buhari regime, has suffered major setbacks. And the civic platforms that should breathe life to people's participation in governance have continued to shrink. To mention a few is the deregistration of political parties that, according to the Independent Electoral Commission, INEC, failed to meet the conditions to remain registered. Despite a previous court order to the contrary, the Independent National Electoral Commission continued in its undemocratic defiance to people's participation in partisan politics. We maintain that this is inimical to what the likes of the late Gani Fawehinmi fought for. That is the multi-party system. Nigerians will not succumb to the binary choice pressure from the two sides of an evil coin, the APC and the PDP. Political parties and the participation in them must be based on ideology, and they must not be reduced to special purpose vehicles for winning elections. Furthermore, as glaring as an albino in daylight are the abuse of power, gross attacks on human rights vis-a-vis rights to freedom of expression, of association, rights to hold thoughts, beliefs, and conscience, flagrant disobedience to court orders laced with irritating impunity. As we will always say, corruption is not actually our problem in this part of the world. Corruption is everywhere. But what has become the fulcrum upon which this corruption has grown is impunity in itself. So we maintain that these agitations, especially from the rank and file, have more economic inclinations than political. We are clear on the fact that aside the nepotistic stature of President Buhari, what have continued to fuel the agitation for secession from different quarters are crippling poverty, economic backwardness, perennial social turmoil in the midst of vast human and material resources. You see, anyone who is not analyzing this issue within this context would be doing a half work. The common man would not mind the heights, and this is our position at the African National Congress. He would not mind the stature. He would not mind the religion, body language, or mother tongue of the occupier of Aso Villa if there was fair access to the dividends of our commonwealth. And what are these things? Quality and affordable education, proper health care, good infrastructure, a thriving business environment, adequate security in all forms. That's food security, cyber security, and security of lives and property. If the Yoruba man or a Yoruba farmer could go to farm and be assured of his safety of himself and the crops and everything, and the Igbo man, could go about his business with the assurance of prosperity, the Hausa man with other ethnic nationalities in the country could be afforded a thriving and safe environment that welcomes development. No one would admire the call for the breakup of any union. What is unfortunate is that the reverse is the case today. And rather than addressing the underlying issues, and what are these issues? It's more economic. It's more of economy than politics. The unpopular regime has resorted to violent harassment of protesters who are exercising of all rights, their rights to freedom of expression. Our position in the African National Congress is that self-determination is a right. We say this with no equivocation, because even the Christian Bible posits that can two walk together except they agree, let alone 200 tribes in a particular space. If the Bible could say, can two work together except they agree? So what then do you say about 200 million people? So the people in the Nigerian space must come together to discuss how they want to live and be governed. We in the African National Congress, we believe that the unity of Nigeria and Nigerians is negotiable and must be negotiated within the ambits of the law that affords equity, fairness, and social justice. We have the belief that you do not command peace into the air by some declaration in Abuja. Where there is no justice, there will be no peace. It's a natural law. It's a natural law. So on the way forward as a people, the African National Congress posits that its manifesto forms the instrument with which it shall mobilize all Nigerians in the struggle for political power towards peace and prosperity. And we made this very clear in the electioneering of 2018 and 2019. The manifesto, codenamed Spicer 8, is detailed on the way out of this quagmire we have found ourselves as a people. However, we are making the following demands in commemoration of the 61st independence anniversary. If anything is worth celebrating at all, these demands should be a kickstart for anything that must, if anything will be celebrated at all. The first is the immediate and unconditional release of all political prisoners. And these are their names: Omoyele Sowore, Nnamdi Kanu, Sunday Adeyemo, Chief Sunday Adeyemo, also known as Sunday Igboho, and all NSAS protesters who are still unjustly languishing in detention centers across the country. There are over 300 of them, for your information. We hope the regime will toe the path of civility, reason, and logic to release these persons before the 20th of October 2021, which marks the anniversary of the killing of peaceful protesters at Lekki, which is now known as, Lekki Massacre. Second demand, an immediate stop to the executive harassment of striking doctors. These are just immediate demands for now. Their demands should rather be met instead of harassing them with court orders and so many illegalities. Immediate halt to borrowing until a serious and independent audit of the earlier received loans is done. You cannot continue to borrow to feed. You borrow to invest in people that you don't borrow to pay salaries and then call that some kind of growth or development. Another demand is we are calling for the resignation of the occupier, because I find it very, I restrain myself to even mention him and mentioned the title to say President Muhammadu Buhari, the occupier of Aso Rock, on the grounds that he is not fit to run this country. We make no bones about it. We are very clear on this particular demand that this man is not fit intellectually, is not fit physically, mentally we are not sure. And the Constitution also makes provisions for all of this. That at some point where there is even a doubt by the tiniest of us in the society, that the National Assembly should go ahead, come up with a team, including medical doctors and all that, to look at, because there are so many issues that are pointing to the fact that this man is not medically fit. So many. One of which is that while people are protesting, it's more psychological than even physical. While people are protesting, instead of calling them to a round table to discuss, what you do is you just order, fire and brimstone on them. That is so unlikely of anybody who is psychologically fit to run a country. Another demand is that we're calling for the trashing of the accidented Electoral Act that was just passed, the amendment bill that was just passed, that gives allowance, in our observation, that gives allowance for fraud and hijack of the electoral process by money bags. For your information, the permissible amount of money you can spend to become a president in this country is now 15 billion in this Electoral Act that was passed. 15 billion naira. This is now law. It was not law before. And they spend more than that. They spend more than that to get to that office. Now that it has now become law that you can spend, it was before 5 billion naira. The amendment was even seeking that this particular amount be brought down, because it's a way of kicking out people who have ideas out of the space. But now that it has become law, it is now in the Electoral Act that 15 billion is the amount, the threshold to run for office. It's a clear, indictment on anything you want to call democracy or anything you want to call a free or fair election, because it's not fair to the poor man. A man who has ideas but is poor. It is not fair. Such a man cannot go on for any political post in this country. And then that's why we keep having this lackluster, low brainers who are running this country. We also call for an electoral act that allows full electronic transmission of results. At this time in our country, a call for National Conference of Nigerians drawn from all ethnic nationalities, religious and cultural orientations, gender classifications, and age differentiation towards establishing a progressive, socially just, economically equitable, and ecologically sustainable society is imminent. We shall continue to be part of such discussions and shall provide leadership at all times as a political party. We also call on members of the public, home and abroad, to join the African Action Congress, which is the only ideologically clear and formidable opposition party in the country today. We thank you very much for listening to us. Solidarity.